Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My guest today is Mr. Vince McNally, who's a former special agent with the FBI. And today with Vince, we'll talk about what happened to flight TWA800, which on July 17, 1996, exploded right after taking off, a few minutes after taking off in New York State on its way to Paris. And a lot of different hypotheses were made back then. Was it terrorism? Was it friendly fire? Was it a bomb on board? And then the FBI, together with the NTSB, cleared that it was just an unfortunate accident. We'll discuss the details of this accident with Vince McNally. Thanks for your time, Vince. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Leo. Great to be here.
Well, before we start, would you like to tell us something about who you are? Just like to introduce yourself and tell us what your background is.
Sure. I've been a special agent. Well, I was a special agent. That's 20 years ago, with the FBI, and I kind of worked my way up into an area which is quite different than a normal investigator. Even though I was a special agent, towards the end of the career, I chose a field within the FBI to assist our agents with issues, whether it's emotional, psychological, or such. But at the same time, I found this to be very helpful, and the challenge was to get the agents to come in and get the help. So that was my goal during I think it was about 5 or 6 years. At the time of the incident at TWA Flight 800, I was assigned. I had just been assigned as a supervisor. I was newly promoted to a supervisor at the FBI Academy. Here, I was in charge of, this was in part of the EAP, Employee Assistance Program, and I was in charge basically of the critical incident stress debriefing teams, as well as peer support. Critical incident debriefing teams involve agents who have been trained to go out and assist, whether it's on the scene for emotional or psychological issues they're having while working or after the incident. In this particular case, I had just gone on vacation, and I was up in northern Canada, where I am now, at my summer house. And all of a sudden, I get a call and say, "Hey, well, sorry, your vacation is cut short. You need to come back. Well, to New York. I need you to go to the site at the TWA Flight 800 out in Long Island." Coincidentally, prior to
Go
my
ahead.
job,
Sorry. Go ahead.
prior to me doing this, I was also in charge of JFK Airport prior to being promoted, to FBI head. Well, I actually had gone to Hawaii, but I was in charge of not in charge, in charge of Aloha Airlines flight, determining only initially, what could have been the cause there. So our job, and that's where I'm going to talk about what the FBI does. Basically, in this particular case, if you get a call, let's say I was at JFK Airport in charge of the airport, which I was for a period of time. You get a call, you automatically respond to any incident involving an aircraft, because you have to determine from the beginning whether it's a destruction of the aircraft or is it a mechanical issue. You can't do that by just waiting around. You have to be on scene. So in this particular case, TWA Flight 800, the FBI, I believe it was Jim Kallstrom, who's the assistant director, dispatched over 1,000 agents to the location, not at once, but at different periods of time. And we had approximately, 16 months investigation. And the teams that go out are the evidence recovery team, as well as other agents to help out and determine what the issue is. Now, in my particular case, I was sent there to run the critical incident debriefing team, or the team, our employee assistance personnel who are trained to be there to assist agents who were having some issues. And that would be, now you're saying, what issues could they have? Well, let's look at it this way. When you're looking at dead bodies or recovering bodies who are decomposed, you do have it sticks with you. So our job was to be there if they had questions. But like 9/11 being there, people don't have questions because they're in the middle of the job. So our job there is to make sure they take care of themselves. And that's what primarily the biggest issue I saw was that agents would continually work forever. They wouldn't want to go home. They didn't want to go back. And this caused some, as I was told by a certain other supervisor, including the lead agent in charge at the site, that this was a problem even for him. This was a problem because the individuals were driving home and they fall asleep almost. Luckily, no one did, but I remember his story very clearly was that he was driving and had to pull over and take a nap on the highway and the Long Island Expressway. And what happened was that, this caused some problems. So what I saw was a lot of issues in that respect. And I also found out that the people who were doing the morgue duty, recovering the bodies, that would be the evidence recovery team, looking for evidence in the body part or bodies, shrapnel or something from the aircraft, that this could be a real problem for them, because what happens the more you see, the more you take in, the more it sticks and the more it can come back and bother you later. That's just a general opinion. So what we did is I asked, even for our people who were the employee assistance trained people, I said, you don't have to go into the temporary morgue, because if you did that, it's going to be in your face. And I said, we need the volunteers to do that. And I remember the chaplains are the ones, they're part of our team. They're the ones who volunteered to do it because unfortunately they had seen a lot themselves over, in their job duties. So this is what I was seeing there from a job description. I was in charge of teams that would be there. We met every night. We did our own debriefing to help out our own people who were dealing with with others taking in. It's called compassion fatigue, taking in more. You're listening to stories, and the stories you're taking them in and becoming part of you. So what we did is we worked with them, and it seemed to be helpful, and we tried to give them the best assistance we could. And those debriefings helped our people to go back out the next day. Okay. Now, I think, like I said, the job of the FBI is to assist in whatever rescue, which unfortunately there was not. Then the next stage is the recovery. And while that's going on, we're looking for evidence to determine what are the causes. So at this point, the FBI agents are looking at the pieces that came in and actually reconstructing them. And they're putting them up in a hangar, which I'll get to after. And so what happens is you got the 1,000 agents, you got certain protocols to follow. And like you mentioned, working with the NTSB, the FAA, trying to determine who's going to end up with the case. Of course, we had a case. I mean, there was no question we were going to do it until we determined what the cause was with the NTSB and the FAA. And there were other local authorities out there who assisted a lot too. So it was a combined effort. Now, was everyone working together? As far as I could see, they were, because our agents, I've always felt this when I was working, that we showed up and we stayed until the job was done. In this particular case, we overstayed. We kept staying and staying, our agents on scene. And we had to work with the agent in charge at the site to say, you need to go home after 10 hours maximum time. So we put cots up there too for people who are just tired. and the same thing we did at 9/11. No one was ready to be debriefed. No, they wanted to just keep working until they found the cause or got to resolution in their mind. So with our group, we work very hard assisting our other agents. And again, what I'm saying is that as an employee assistance supervisor, you are not at that particular juncture of investigative work. You're there to assist an administrative assistance. You're not doing the investigation, but at the same time, you're observing and assisting our own people in getting help. And even the police, if they had issues, I'd find out who their employee assistance person is and make sure that they got the help they needed. So that's just a brief overview of where we were. And again, my experience at JFK, and even when I was stationed in Honolulu prior to this with the lower airlines, the same, where the structure of the top just flew off, I was aware of how to do these investigations. And so I knew what our job was on scene to determine first, help out, and then determine the causes.
Well,
So let's see, let's move along with other questions here because I'm.
Yeah, sure. No, it's interesting that you mentioned that you were in Canada when this happened because I was in Canada as well. I was 18, but I was vacationing in Canada at my aunt's house. So when that happened, I had a good coverage on the news because, of course, in Italy, the case was not as well covered in the news as it was in Canada because Toronto and New York are very close to each other. So I don't know. I just think it's interesting that we're talking about it 28 years later, and we were both in Canada. That's it.
What province were you in?
Ontario.
Oh, okay. I was next door in Quebec, the French-speaking place. My
Yeah, but I
wife,
was in the south. I was in the south. I was in Toronto, so I was in the
yeah,
south.
we were
Uh,
no.
what I'm thinking of here is have you also heard the personal stories of the victims? Because I think that not only dead bodies, but also hearing the stories of people who were on board that can have an impact on the mental health of the workers. I don't know if you heard any of this.
Yeah, this is that's called the area of compassion fatigue, listening to stories. If you keep listening to these people, not the survivors but the relatives and their grief, it can impact you. Now we have our teams do that too. At this point, we were out interviewing people. Those 1,000 agents weren't all on site. They were doing various jobs, as well as evidence being picked up and sent to either the NTSB site or the FBI laboratory. There was a lot of activity going on, and it was constantly busy site. Let me talk about the hangar. I did have an opportunity to go there. I was there a couple of weeks, and I went there towards the end of my time at the site. And the first thing I noticed, I said, "Wow, they put together a lot of this." And I said, that's pretty good to be able to do that with the pieces that came in." And I am not a bomb expert at all. So I'm looking at it for something that shows push out, from the pushing out or indentation or anything. And the pieces there were they weren't totally smooth, but I could not see that. So I'm thinking it's internal at this point. But again, I'm not doing the actual investigation. I know the FBI has spent, well, months, 16 months, and I had the opportunity to review FBI documents. There's a site called vault.fbi.gov. It has under the Freedom of Information, it has a lot of communications from the FBI to NTSB to other offices asking for assistance or doing evidence checking out evidence, determining what it is. And I looked there for a long time to find if there was anything that in the evidence that indicated that there were a couple of clues that, oh, it might have been this, or they heard something and they went out and interviewed somebody and that didn't pan out. So you're going to ask me what is my opinion, and I would say it was an internal, maybe it was the fuel leak hitting some electrical wiring. That's what I was reading a lot about in those reports. Whether that, we can sit here today and guess, but that would be my, at this juncture, that's what I think it is, unless they can prove, as the Bureau says, the case was closed. And the reason being because 14 months and they didn't come up with, yes, it's a criminal activity. So now, can this always be reopened? Absolutely. Every case uses the words, unless a UACB, unless advised contrary by the Bureau, meaning unless they come up with something extra, some other information, new information, they actually will, they will reopen. I've had cases I've reopened based upon new information and new informant information or new information from witnesses. So yes, they will reopen it if necessary. So we work together. I mean, I know I have always, either whether I was assigned to JFK Airport or on site here, I did not see arguments between local police or NTSB or FAA. The goal was to get things done. Now I did read in the documents, there was one time where they didn't share the NTSB, but that happens, some in the spur of the moment, somebody sends a communication, forgot to copy us in. So that can happen, and we've done that too. Nobody's immune to that issue. So, it was very, like I said, back in the hangar, it was very quiet when we walked in. The people were not talking inside there, they were looking. Everyone who was in there, there weren't many in there walking. They did not allow very many people in. I think maybe there were 10 people in there when I walked in, when I was able to come in. So, like I said, the issues I saw were primarily in the mental health and emotional aspects of trying to help our agents on site to deal with the trauma of basically looking at dead bodies or hypothesizing, say, well, this person here died, he must have been hurt really bad. And I remember even in Aloha Airlines, when I went on board, I went on right at the beginning, being stationed in, I had just moved from JFK to Honolulu, and the special agent charge says, go out to there, you're the airport guy, head out to the airport and figure out what's going on. So I walked on the aircraft and I was astounded at the structural damage and that people had survived that landing. And the thing that sticks with me always is that one of the armrests was bent about 90 degrees. And I said, how can that happen? Somebody holding on to that? I mean, that's impossible, but I don't know. So
Yeah, I know about that case. Just one dead person, if I remember well.
So
the one who got stuck into the hole in the fuselage.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember about that case. Yeah, I remember seeing a few documentaries about it. Well, let's go back to TWA800. How was the collaboration between different agencies? Because we mentioned that there was the FBI, the NTSB, I guess the local police as well. I don't know who others. How was the collaboration between them, co-working?
Well, from everything we saw, and I mentioned that from my point of view, is that I did not see issues there. And having spoken to the agent in charge, who I happen to know pretty well because I had been stationed in New York previously, at scene, he did not indicate that. I mean, the police, everyone wanted to find out what the issue was. That was the goal. And I think everyone who showed up was committed to, let's find it. Let's find why this happened, because and going out into the ocean, picking up the bodies. And our evidence response team, that was their job. And actually, we have automatic debriefings after incidents like this. Again, it's difficult to do a debriefing when you're in the middle of the job. So we have to wait a while afterwards. But we're on scene for whatever help they need. And like I said before, we had our own people I did not put into the morgue unless they volunteered. And I remember one of them who was by a previous acting supervisor on my group was sent in there and was having a lot of difficulty with it. So that's when I instituted a policy that you have to volunteer before you go in the morgue and stand there and watch them do their autopsies and such. So this was helpful to be on scene, and that was our job, to assist. The aircraft, I mean, as far as the other agencies, I did not see any animosity or any, competition in my view. Now that's just me being there on scene for 3 or 4 weeks. 3 or 4 weeks after the incident occurred.
So. Well, at a certain point, we know that it was determined that it was an incident because of the high temperature of the fuel inside the central tank. But before that, we know that there was a lot of media pressure because someone was saying it was a missile, maybe terrorists, maybe friendly fire, or maybe there was a bomb on board. Also because some explosive material was found on the plane, and then it was clarified that it was because the plane had been used for the training of bomb sniffing dogs. But so before the reason was clarified by investigators, what was the feeling? What did agents say to each other in terms of what the reason could have been?
Okay, again, we were not clear. Most of us said could be a bomb, could be a terrorist, but nobody had pinpoint information to say that's really what it is. I'm positive. I didn't get anyone telling me that or relating to me that this is the reason why. The news media does what it does. It'll take a theory because it sells and it's good information. For them, it's something that people are interested in, theories and such. It sells. And I remember cases where I'm reading in the paper that didn't happen. And I go, well, that's not true. I'm the one who was there and this did not happen. It says I tortured a prisoner while they were on a Coast Guard ship. And I go, what? Where did that come from? But that's the lawyer probably telling the press something. And they expounded on. That's what the press does. And their job is to sell a newspaper and sell the story and get the better story. As far as, most agents are told not to say anything. For the 30 years I was there, our rules were very simple. You just refer to the press officer. That's it. It's a simple rule because once you say something, it can be turned into something else. So we never, that was our rule. And as far as I knew, everyone at that time, everyone seemed to follow that. So I did not find any other issues there. Again, we did a lot of, the debriefing we did was for our people, but it was more, we call it a diffusing, means on the site, you just talk to them. You go over and talk to them. It's not a full debriefing, which takes time. Because in a full debriefing, you sit around with a group. It's not just one person, a mental health person. It's maybe a psychologist or a mental health person, chaplain, and some peer support people who are trained. And what happens in that room is that the people start saying, wait a minute, this is what I heard. This is how I feel. So wait a minute, I'm not crazy. This is what I'm feeling is normal. So this helps normalize the situation for the individual, and that allows them to get the help they need if they want. Afterwards, we provide that. In the diffusing, which is what we're really doing at site, you're there talking to the person, seeing what, okay, how's it going? Just listening and then supporting them in whatever way they want. Can they have issues that might have them removed? Yes. But I did not see that there. The only thing, a lot of what I saw was people just wanting to work, just spending the time to find out and be there. They spent a lot of hours, our agents, and again, the biggest problem was going home for these agents and driving and being exhausted. So this is what I'm observing as a employee assistance supervisor. As far as the work, it's difficult for the looking at body parts. Period.
And what do you remember about the faces when the cause of the accident was determined? Or do you remember how the investigators got to that point?
I think after I call it refuting or getting over and going and investigating all the other theories that came up, and there were a lot. There were hundreds and hundreds of phone calls, interviewing 7,000 people by the FBI. That's a lot of people. And people would call in and say, we have a hotline, and then they call in. I used to work that. I was a support employee. You answer the phone, you take the information. Now it's more automated. It goes into central. But then you're sitting there writing this stuff down. So so they're listening to these stories. They're sorting them out and then sending an investigator over to, they're categorizing them and keeping them and indexing them according to how the story comes in, and then sending people out to interview as needed. And then they come back, write a report, we call it a 302 interview, and then provide that to the supervisors. And then they sort it out and determine if this makes sense, or is there any collaboration of information? Is there any other information which kind of brings this together? And having not sat in on that, I cannot go further and explain that, except that's our policy, how we do it.
Well, let me ask you something that I think that defies common sense for a lot of people. Is it common in an investigation like this to have conflicting eyewitnesses accounts?
Yes. Yeah, I can think of many cases where I talk to somebody and somebody says, this happened over here, and I saw this. And somebody else is listening to that, starts picking up on that, and then goes back in his mind and starts putting that together as part of his story. I've seen people say that what they saw as a hostage negotiator, you're talking to somebody, which I did also, you're talking to people and you're trying to get them to work with you. In cases of real bad cases, they may feel something that they're not responsible, or that they have somebody's against them. So you don't know what baggage the person is carrying when they come up with their thoughts process. It impacts how they think. So can people have different stories? Yes. Yeah. There's an old saying, when you interview somebody like a car accident, each one will have a slightly different story. So you got to listen to those stories and then write them up, and then try to come back and see if you can clarify what really happened. And that takes time.
Well, this case also had a lot of media pressure on it because the Olympics were starting in Atlanta, were starting in a couple of days. And I don't know if you ever heard this story, but there was a very famous Italian soccer player who was supposed to be boarding that plane, but he got early on at the airport and he asked if they could change his flight. So instead of boarding TWA800, he took a direct flight to Milan. So this guy survived.
Right.
And when he arrived in Italy, Christian Panucci was playing right back for AC Milan back then. And when he arrived in Italy, he said, "It's incredible that I'm still alive just for asking somebody to change my flight." Having said this, do you think that the media pressure on this case had an impact on the investigations, a positive or a negative one, or none at all?
May have a little bit, but this is a normal course of business within the FBI to be criticized, to come up with their theories based upon their interview of witnesses, not based upon the totality of all the investigation. I think I said that right. They're coming up with their theory, but it's not, we expect that. I mean, I have never had a case where the media was 100% dealing. It did not come out exactly the way I investigated when they reported. Let's put it that way. So they had impact because people want resolution. Everyone wanted resolution to this story, and they want it yesterday. They want the information yesterday, and they want it now. Now. Give me the information. Why did this happen? You should have the answer. This pressure was continuous. I can imagine the Jim Kowskum sitting there in the office trying to sort this out. It's very difficult, and we expect this. If you expect it, it's not something that bothers me, at least over time, as being an FBI agent. You expect this to happen every single time. So that's why, unless you're the supervisor, you're not going to be impacted on that, except by friends and stuff who might ask you. But the news media will continue to do that, and that's their job is to get the information according to what they can do. So what can we do? I'm not sure about that. As far as what's happened, I think this is normal. This is normal standard operating procedure to be criticized and to be hurry up, get the job done, and the news media putting pressure on us. But we cannot, I don't recall when I worked, and I say that when I worked that we ever had answered somebody, the news media, because we wanted to answer them. And we answered only when the fact was over, and the fact that we did not have to use that evidence in trial.
Well, we also have something peculiar that happened with the TWA800, that the wreckage of the plane was pretty much reconstructed, I think 80% of it or something like that. But then after 25 years, it was decommissioned because it was never meant to be a memorial. What are your thoughts on this at the personal level? Because to me, that's so disrespectful. I don't know. I totally disagree with decommissioning that wreckage. What do you think?
I never actually thought of that, but I see where you're coming from. It could have been a memorial, but it's like 9/11. They erected a memorial, separate memorial. To me, if I was the surviving relatives looking at that plane, would just open up a can of worms. It would just make it worse to me, because you're looking at it and then you start thinking, wait a minute, I see something, and then you're going to go into it. Having a separate memorial, I think, in my opinion, would be more appropriate.
Vince, many thanks for your time and for your very precious explanations. I think that you gave us a unique angle because no one ever talks about mental health of the investigators. And of course, investigating something that big and that horrible, even if it was nobody's intention to do that, can have a toll on people investigating this. So I think that the view that we gave in this discussion is very helpful and important. So many thanks for your time again.
Thank you very much, Leo. I enjoyed talking.
Thanks everybody else for watching this, and see you all very soon next time. Bye-bye.